大家好，欢迎来到 Andy 口才说，我是 Andy。在这个频道呢，我会用白话的方式陪你一起看懂市场、科技趋势以及背后真正的投资逻辑。今天这集呢，我想跟大家聊一下我看到觉得很值得推荐分享的一个视频，就是女股神 ARK 基金的 Big Idea 2026。ARK 基金每一年都会发布一份研究报告，专门分析未来最有可能改变世界的科技趋势。而这一次，他们提出一个很重要的观点：未来几年的科技革命其实不是只有 AI 了，而是5大科技平台同时爆发，其中包括了 AI 人工智慧、生物科技与基因工程、区块链与加密货币、自动驾驶与机器人、重复性的火箭以及能源存储的技术。ARK 基金认为，当这些技术同时进入成熟期，再加上 AI 作为加速器，未来整个经济的结构，甚至股票的结构，都有可能会被重新改写。那接下来我会先放一段他们视频里面的内容，带大家一起看看 ARK 基金是怎么看待这一波科技革命。
We think that there are 5 major innovation platforms that are entering the marketplace today. AI as the central dynamo that's accelerating all the other innovation platforms. Multiomics, where Shay and Ovid are going to hold forth. Public blockchains, including stablecoins and bitcoins. Robotics, including humanoid robots and specialized robots and reusable rockets, where Daniel's going to speak about today. Let's see, can I keep track of everything I've hit? Energy storage, including the robotaxi and autonomous mobility opportunity. And gosh, I think I've covered them all. So these 5 innovation platforms are all hitting critical stages of inflection and leading to an unprecedented investment cycle. So if you look at the kind of acceleration in investment in the underlying infrastructure we need technologically, you have to go back to the railroad to see a similar amount of investment in technology as a % of GDP. This is not only in the immediate term impacting macroeconomic growth, and that data centers are driving marginal GDP activity, and the accelerating investment in AI agents is transforming the business landscape, but they are also laying the foundation that is going to cause continued economic growth as we get positive return on investment on this technological infrastructure. Net, we believe this will lead to more than 7% compounded growth real in the global economy through the end of the decade. And this sounds wild and outrageous, but it's actually consistent with economic history. When you have major technology transitions, that leads to a transformation in the underlying equilibrium rate of growth. Whereas the world thinks we're going to grow 3%, we think that there's strong evidence that there will be an inflection in macroeconomic growth driven by these technologies, all of which are being accelerated by artificial intelligence. And markets will follow the macros. And so we believe that more than 60% of total equity market capitalization globally will accrue to disruptive innovation platforms. And that's the overall message I want you to understand is you need to be exposed to innovation. Imagine having an unprecedented macroeconomic cycle with a transformation in the rate of growth, and you are in a set of core equities that is not innovation exposed, and those actually slightly decrease over the course of the decade as these innovation companies become wildly more valuable. We literally think that's a possibility. And again, it's consistent with history. In the late 1870s, believe it or not, 75% of equity market capitalization in the US was attributed to the railroad. Well, we're in a similar investment cycle, and we think there's going to be a similar enterprise value accrual across the 5 innovation platforms. So that's what we call the great acceleration. And now, Ovid, hit me with some questions.
All right, Brett, our first question, and feel free to phone a friend. So we have many friends here, if you feel it would be helpful. Number 1, are we overbuilding AI infrastructure relative to energy availability? And what are the implications?
Well, I think people are concerned not just relative to energy availability. People are like, oh my gosh, all of this money pouring into AI, how can that possibly be a wise thing to do? And the way we measure performance against AI is you and I as a knowledge worker, how much value do we get out of kind of the AI software that we're using? And right now, we think if you're using AI full bore, you can get a 50% ROI improvement on AI. As in, I put in 1 unit of work, I get 1.5 units of output. So I should be willing to pay half my salary for that AI software. Now, businesses don't pay half the salary, they pay 10% of that. But it's still an amazing amount of revenue and an amazing deal for the business. And so with that context and with AI continuing to improve, we believe that there will be literally trillions of dollars, in the central case is $7 trillion spent on AI software, and that's more than enough to support more than $1 trillion in infrastructure build for data centers. Now, energy is in a narrow purpose, sometimes it's a constraint, as in building a data center in the middle of, Ohio, you have to figure out how to get the energy in and to build the data center out. And there's a lot of great neo-cloud companies trying to do that. We don't think it's an aggregate global constraint, but it is certainly a friction point that needs to be crossed.
And I'll just add one thing. The genesis of this question is the tech and telecom bubble and bust in the late 90s. If you think about how to frame what Brett just said, we laid a lot of fiber for the internet age in the 90s. That stayed dark for years. It's only really being used now. Today, every GPU is being used, and there is a shortage. So very big difference.
Yes, even the old ones are being used. And kind of the $7 trillion that I named is just for basically like word-based language models. This is like to help enterprise workers. There's a whole nother, between multiomics, where there's huge rafts of data that we can't effectively process, embodied robotics, including autonomous mobility and humanoid robots. We need more compute. We need trillions of dollars of compute. And so we think you'll see that play out over the course of the decade.
I'll go to the next question, which is, I think, hits on one of the biggest examples of convergence here. How feasible and economically viable are space-based data centers? And what technical and commercial milestones would need to be achieved for them to become competitive with terrestrial alternatives?
Well, so Daniel's the expert here, but I'll take a stab at it, and you can tell me where I get it wrong. Okay, so yeah. I mean, on the launch platforms that are available today, they are not economic. So SpaceX has the Falcon 9. It can land, but it's a limited tonnage that it can loft into space. Once they get the Starship, which is their next generation rocket reusable, we think that the cost per ton into orbit could fall into the low hundreds of dollars. And once you cross that threshold, then actually AI space-based compute becomes cost competitive with terrestrial compute. Now, that's a big deal for reusable rockets, because instead of, you need maybe 60 times the launch volume that you needed before. And so it's a nice example of how an acceleration in AI is accelerating the demand for an entire another technology. It's also a big deal related to the previous question, where if people in Ohio are throwing themselves in front of the data center bulldozers, you have an alternative spot in which to put data centers. And so it should allow AI compute to scale without some of the local constraints that may be imposed by political considerations.
And I'll just add something there. Elon Musk says this is an engineering problem. And we've learned when Elon puts his mind to an engineering problem, most people thought lining a car with cell phone batteries was a bad idea. Nobody did it. He was right. He was right. And so we're pretty excited that he's now focused on this space. Literally.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Cathie. All right, Frank Downing, would be great if you could talk us a little bit through how we're thinking about AI, and then we'll have a couple questions.
Awesome. So I'll cover our AI research in a little bit more detail, which we think is this generational platform shift where we've seen these transformations in the past where we've gone from the PC era to the smartphone era, and now we think that AI is powering a new generational shift in how we interact with technology. And that new user interface isn't going from a keyboard to a touchscreen, it's going to natural language. And we think we're going to interact with computers in a fundamentally new way and make controlling computers and technology much more accessible and much more powerful. And we're going to see a whole new array of form factors that enable that. I'm wearing my Meta Ray-Ban glasses today that have an AI assistant built into them. And when we compare this to the last platform shift through the internet age, which included smartphones and cloud computing, we're seeing adoption happen at twice the rate, actually faster than twice the rate, where we've reached 20% of the relevant population in just 3 years compared to 7 years for the internet. So it feels like things are happening very quickly, and we can see that in the data that it is. And part of what's enabling that are the strong cost declines that we see in AI, where the cost to train and infer AI models is falling dramatically. And that allows the technology to diffuse at a rapid pace throughout the economy. And we think this creates opportunities for both consumers, enterprises, and in kind of embodied robotic form factors, which we'll cover in a minute. And just to touch on the consumer, for example, we're seeing personal AI agents be the new first point of contact to products and services and information on the internet, where you're going to ChatGPT or Claude and trusting them more and more rather than going to a traditional Google search, for example. And I should mention Gemini as well, because Google has the second most adoption for consumer AI relative to OpenAI. And we think this creates new monetization opportunities in the form of the subscriptions that you're seeing today, commerce, which AI agents will be able to transact for us and make purchasing easier, and in advertising, as we see attention shift into AI systems. I think that will move advertising dollars into these new assistants that we're interacting with. And I'll just give one quick example of how this is kind of coming together on the commerce side, for example, which is that with ChatGPT, you can now launch app experiences inside of it. And one of those app experiences is Instacart. And I've wanted to do grocery delivery for a long time, but it's kind of painstaking to type in all these different groceries into the app, and I'd rather just go to the store. It's easy. It's hard to break out of that habit that I've had for my whole life. And with ChatGPT now, I tried this the other week. You can take a picture of a recipe book and through the Instacart integration, just say, order this for me. And it gets it 90% right. You change a few things, and as the leaders of the AI labs like to say, this is the dumbest the models will ever be. So that experience is only going to get better, and that creates a revenue opportunity for Instacart that wouldn't have existed before, because that was work I was doing for myself that now I'm very happy to pay for all that time saving. And if I transition now to kind of talking more about the knowledge work opportunity, AI applied to businesses rather than our consumer life. You may have heard, the term agent become very popular over the last year, but also, especially since December, a lot of talk about agentic coding and products like Claude Code that are resulting in a dramatic increase in developer productivity. And I think we've seen this since the release of ChatGPT, that AI is good at writing software. But what has really happened is a fundamental inflection point starting in November, December of last year, where models have been able to accomplish much more long time horizon tasks, which means they're much more useful and much higher leverage on human time. So rather than having to babysit them and answer questions minute by minute or going for 5 minutes, AI agents can now reliably work for 30 minutes plus. And you can see this in various research studies, which we have on the screen here, where the average amount of time an agent can reliably complete a task increased from 5 minutes to 30 minutes over 2025. And actually, the latest data points are now up to 55 minutes plus. So we're seeing this huge inflection point that's actually growing super exponentially, where agents are getting more and more capable, which is increasing businesses' willingness to pay for it. So we looked at the cost of a ChatGPT subscription, which the basic enterprise plan is $20 to $40 a month. With the time savings that companies are reporting per knowledge worker per day, you pay for that monthly subscription in less than a full day's work. So we think there's a lot of room to go in AI monetization.
I was just going to add one thing, and it refers back to the first question. What you just said about reasoning, really taking off, reasoning the long-term tasks, taking off in November. This has turbocharged the demand for GPUs.
Yeah,
so
definitely. Yep.
Great. I think these next two questions touch on both of these. So first, where is AI creating genuine net new revenue versus simply compressing margins through efficiency gains? And how does ARK distinguish signal from hype?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that The Instacart example I gave is actually a good one because that is revenue that wouldn't have existed. So that's new revenue created. Where we're seeing it across public companies, for example, there's a huge increase in demand for compute. We saw that through the chip companies. All of the clouds, AWS, Azure, GCP, have seen accelerating revenues throughout the last few years. GCP is growing the fastest, 48% year-on-year growth for a $70 billion business is a lot of new revenue. But I think the question probably gets to not just the enablers, but the end beneficiaries and where they're seeing revenue growth. And I think a company like Palantir has been instrumental in showing examples of how that's happening, and that's why their business is growing so quickly. But I'll give one which is in the insurance space, where they work with clients like AIG that get more applications for insurance than they can actually process, hundreds of thousands of more applications than humans have time to go through. And there's some way they prioritize that, but there's revenue left on the table. And so now with Palantir's help, they're having AI agents evaluate and underwrite these contracts they would not have been able to write previously, which is resulting in new revenue for the business. And I think there's pockets of that throughout every different business in the economy where there's things we could be doing, but we don't have the time and resources today to do it. And I think net that creates a AI that is not just reducing costs to operate, but massively market expanding.
当我们回顾 ARK 基金的 Big Idea 2026，最震撼的不是单一技术的突破，而是整个世界正在进入一个前所未有的阶段。AI 不再只是一个软体工具，它已经成为中央发动机，同时加速5个创新平台的汇聚。这些平台不再各自独立发展，它们互相强化、互相解锁。AI 让基因数据爆炸式成长，加速治愈型疗法的到来。可重复使用火箭把发射成本降到每公斤不到$100，让太空资料中心成为现实。自主驾驶 Robotaxi 把每英里成本压到$0.25，释放出4兆以上的隐形劳动价值。这一切正在同时发生。结果是什么呢？ARK 预测到2030年，全球实质 GDP 复合成长有可能会超过7%，远高于市场预期的3%，而是历史上每次重大技术转型都会出现的生产力跃升，就像铁路时代、电气时代、网际网络时代一样，只是这一次呢，速度会更快，规模会更大。更重要的是，股市的价值将会被重新分配。我们相信呢，未来5到10年，全球股市总市值会超过60%，将由这一些破坏式创新的平台公司创造。如果你今天的投资组合没有足够的曝险于这些未来的技术，那么你很可能会在这一波历史级的成长中大幅落后，眼睁睁的看着这些传统资产相对缩水。这也代表了一个巨大的机会，我们正站在一个创业爆炸式的起点，因为现在每个人都可以用自然语言写程式，启动生意 ，AI 代理帮你处理复杂任务，基因编辑让罕见疾病可治愈 ，Robotaxi 呢让交通成本暴跌，区块链让财富真正的中心化。这不是科幻，而是已经正在路上了，正在规模化的现实。最大的竞争对手从来都不是其他公司，而是惯性与现状。当世界还在担心失业、通胀、能源短缺时，那些敢勇于拥抱创新的人将会成为这场大加速的最大赢家。所以问问自己，准备好投资未来而不是过去了吗？然后行动起来，因为历史从来不会等任何人。如果你也对这种市场趋势、科技发展还有投资逻辑有兴趣，记得订阅我的频道 Andy 口才说，我是 Andy， 我们下次见。